The wind rolled across the prairie in long, invisible waves, bending the tall grass until it whispered against itself like nervous voices. The rancher noticed the change in the air before he saw her. Storms always announced themselves to him that way, with pressure in his ears and a tightening behind the eyes, the land warning those who listened. He had just finished checking the far fence when he saw a shape near the cottonwoods, by the dry creek bed, too still to be cattle, too upright to be a fallen branch. As he rode closer, the shape shifted. A woman stood there, tall in a way that made him slow the horse without thinking. Not broad or threatening, just large, like she had been built for a world with wider doors and higher ceilings. Her coat hung loose on her frame, patched in places that spoke of long use and careful mending. Mud clung to the hem, and her boots looked borrowed from a different life entirely. She didn't raise her hands or back away. She simply watched him approach, eyes dark and alert, like someone who had learned not to expect kindness, but to be ready if it came. "You lost?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse rather than anger. She hesitated, then shook her head once. "No," she said. "Just ran out of road." That answer stayed with him. He dismounted, the horse snorting softly behind him, and took in the rest of her. Her hair was braided thickly down her back, streaked with silver that caught the fading light. Her face was lined, not with age so much as with weight, years pressed into skin by grief and weather and waiting. She stood straight despite her exhaustion, as if leaning might mean collapsing altogether. Storm clouds were building fast now, bruised purple along the horizon. He glanced at the sky, then back at her. "You can't stay out here tonight," he said. "Weather's turning mean." "I know," she replied. No pleading, no challenge, just fact. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, considering. He had lived alone long enough that decisions like this felt strange, like reaching with a hand that had forgotten how to open. But leaving her there felt wrong in a way that settled deep in his chest. "My place isn't far," he said finally. "You can wait out the storm." She studied him, searching for something. Danger, maybe, or expectation. Whatever she looked for, she didn't find it. She nodded once. "Thank you." The ride back was quiet. She walked beside the horse, stride long and steady, never once asking for help. By the time they reached the house, rain had begun to fall in scattered drops, tapping the dust into dark coins. The ranch house stood low and sturdy against the land, wood silvered by time, porch boards creaking under his boots as he opened the door. Inside, the air smelled of old pine, coffee grounds, and solitude. The place was clean but sparse, lived in without decoration. A single table sat near the window, two chairs on opposite sides as if arguing with each other. A kettle rested on the stove, cold, but ready. She paused just inside the doorway, instinctively ducking her head, eyes flicking up to the ceiling beams. "You can sit," he said, suddenly aware of how big she seemed in the small space, how careful she was not to bump anything. "I'll put some water on." She took the chair closest to the door, perching on it like she might need to leave in a hurry. When he handed her a mug a few minutes later, her fingers wrapped around it with reverence, as though warmth were a thing she didn't take for granted anymore. "What's your name?" he asked. "Margaret," she said. "Most folks call me Maggie." He nodded. "I'm Eli." They drank in silence for a while, rain beginning to drum harder against the roof. He noticed how her shoulders slowly lowered as the heat seeped into her hands, how her breathing eased without her seeming to realize it. People didn't relax around him often. He wasn't unkind, just quiet. Silence tended to make people uneasy, but Maggie seemed to understand it, to sit inside it like a familiar room. When the thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows, she stiffened. It was quick, the reaction, but he saw it. Something old and sharp flashed behind her eyes before she smoothed it away. "There's a back room," he said, standing and clearing his throat. "Bed's there. Only one, though." The words sounded different once spoken, heavier, clumsier. He wasn't sure why he felt the need to say it aloud, to mark the boundary even as he offered shelter. Maybe because he didn't want there to be confusion. Maybe because he hadn't shared space with anyone in a long time. She looked up at him, and for a heartbeat he wondered if he'd made a mistake. Her gaze was steady, measuring, not afraid but aware. She set the mug down carefully as if placing something fragile. "My room only has one bed," he repeated, slower now, giving her time to refuse if she wanted. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her shoulders eased and something like relief crossed her face. Softening the lines there, she gave a small, almost private smile. "I've slept on floors," she said quietly. "Barns, church steps. One bed sounds like a luxury, He nodded, unsure what to say to that. He turned toward the back room, then hesitated, glancing at the narrow hallway and the low doorframe. "Mind your head," he said almost apologetically. She followed, ducking without comment, stepping into the room and taking it in. The bed was plain, neatly made, pressed against one wall. A single lamp sat on the nightstand, its light warm and low. It wasn't much, but it was solid, real. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, then looked at him again. Her voice dropped, not out of fear, but intimacy, as if sharing a truth she didn't often speak. "I'll make myself small," she whispered. The words hit him harder than any accusation could have. He saw then not just her size, but the years she had spent folding herself inward so others wouldn't feel crowded by her presence. He swallowed, something tight forming in his throat. "You don't have to," he said gently. "Just rest." Outside, the storm gathered its strength, but inside the little house, something else settled into place, quiet, tentative, and human. Crowded night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, the kind that pressed down rather than comforted. The storm arrived in full force not long after the lamp was turned low, thunder cracking so close it felt as if the sky had split open directly above the house. Rain slammed against the roof in sheets, finding every loose nail and weak shingle, demanding to be heard. Eli lay on his back on the narrow bed, hands folded over his chest, staring at the dark outline of the ceiling beams. He could map every crack up there from years of insomnia. Yet tonight they looked unfamiliar, as though the room itself knew it was no longer alone. Beside him, Maggie lay curled on her side, facing the wall. She had arranged herself carefully, knees drawn up, shoulders angled inward, her long body folded with deliberate precision. There was a clear line of space between them, a quiet agreement neither had spoken aloud. Her breathing was slow but shallow, controlled, the kind that came from habit rather than ease. Eli could hear it even over the rain, each inhale measured, each exhale restrained, as if she feared taking too much air. Another thunderclap shook the windows closer than the last. Maggie's breath caught. It was a small sound, barely there, but it sliced through him sharper than the thunder ever could. Her body went rigid, every muscle locking at once. The bed creaked softly under the sudden tension. Without thinking, Eli shifted. The mattress dipped slightly as he turned onto his side, careful not to crowd her.
He extended his hand into the space between them.
Palm down, stopping well short of touching her arm. It was an instinctive gesture, the way he might steady a frightened horse without grabbing the reins. "You're safe," he said quietly, his voice low and even. "House is solid. Been standing through storms worse than this." For a moment she didn't respond. Then slowly she turned her head. In the dim light from the lamp, her eyes caught a faint glow reflecting gold and shadow. She studied his hand, hovering there like a promise that asked nothing in return. "I know," she said after a while. "My body just doesn't always listen." He nodded, understanding that more than he expected. Silence settled again, broken only by the drumming rain. Gradually her muscles loosened, the tension bleeding away, as if her body had decided to trust his calm more than her memories. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Time felt strange in the dark, stretched thin by the storm. Eli was just beginning to wonder if sleep might find him after. All when she spoke again, her voice softer now, stripped of its careful edges. "I was married," she said. He didn't answer right away. He'd learned long ago that people shared things when they were ready, not when prompted. He simply listened. "His name was Thomas," she continued. "He used to joke that I scared people before I ever opened my mouth. Said it was a gift. Keeps the foolish ones honest, he'd say." A faint, bittersweet smile touched her lips, visible even in the low light. "With him I never felt big. Just present." Eli swallowed, the word present settling somewhere deep in his chest. Sounds like he knew what mattered.
"He did," she said.
Her smile faded. "He died 3 winters ago. Fever took him quick. After that," she trailed off, then let out a slow breath. "The world stopped making space for me. Or maybe I just noticed it more." She shifted slightly, the bed creaking in response, then seemed to catch herself, freezing as if worried she had moved too much. "You don't have to hold yourself like that," Eli said gently. "This bed won't break." She huffed out a quiet laugh, surprised by it. "It's not the bed I worry about." "I figured," he replied. Another wave of thunder rolled overhead, more distant now, its edge dulled. Rain still fell hard, but the storm was beginning to move on, its anger spent. Maggie's breathing deepened, the careful restraint easing into something closer to rest. "Why did you let me stay?" she asked suddenly. Not accusing, curious, Eli considered the question. He could have given an easy answer because it was right, because the storm was bad, but those felt thin, insufficient. "Because I've been alone a long time," he said instead. "And because you looked like someone who knew what that costs." She was quiet for a while after that. Then she shifted again, this time deliberately turning onto her back. Her arm lay closer to his now, still not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Most men," she said slowly, "either stare or look away. You didn't do either." He shrugged, though she couldn't see it. "Didn't seem necessary." Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "That might be the kindest thing anyone's done for me in years." Outside, the rain softened, the steady hammering turning into a gentle, almost patient rhythm. The wind lost its bite, sighing instead of howling. The house creaked as it settled, wood adjusting to the cooling air. Eli felt his eyelids growing heavy, the tension in his shoulders finally loosening. For the first time that night, he let himself relax into the mattress. Maggie noticed. She shifted again, just a little closer, enough that her arm brushed his hand. She stilled instantly, waiting for his reaction. He didn't pull away. The contact was brief, light as a question, but it grounded them both. Maggie exhaled fully then, a long, unguarded breath that seemed to empty something old from her chest. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" "For not asking me to be smaller," she said. He turned his head toward her, meeting her gaze in the dimness. "You don't have to be anything here," he said. "Just human." Her eyes shone, not with tears but with recognition. She nodded once, then closed them. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, deep and unrestrained, the sleep of someone who finally felt allowed to rest. Eli stayed awake a little longer, listening to the quiet that followed the storm. The ranch, the land, the lonely house, they all felt different now, altered by the simple presence of another heartbeat in the room. He realized, as sleep finally claimed him, that the bed had never really been too small. It had only been waiting for the right kind of space to be shared.